As an avid reader and book collector, I always hear the saying of not judging a book by its cover. But as a writing major and English minor, it's hard not to get into the habit of collecting books with interesting, unique, and inviting covers. My bookshelves are lined with multiple cover editions of the same book, Wuthering Heights, Dracula, Frankenstein, just to name a few. One of these books, Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, is in desperate need of a revamped cover. While the list of classic books that can use a remastered cover is almost endless, Pride and Prejudice holds a special place in my heart. As arguably one of the most universally read classics in the English language, it's hard to find someone who did not have to read this book for high school, or in my case, revisit the book in undergrad. My local library at home even displays most cover editions of Jane Austen's works during her birthday month of December. You can also see movie adaptations of Jane Austen's works, the most memorable being the Pride and Prejudice adaptation, directed by Joe Wright and starring both Keira Knightley and Matthew Macfadyen in 2005. You can also see Pride and Prejudice being dissected in book clubs for all ages. My goal of modernizing the cover for Pride and Prejudice was twofold. One, I wanted a more inviting experience for those that are not as well versed in classic literature as they would like to be, but they would like to read more classic works. I find that the editions that you read in high school with the Victorian portraits on the cover are a little intimidating to people who aren't really all that familiar with the language inside. And for my second goal, I wanted to create a cover that an avid book collector like me would proudly display on their shelves among all of the others. These are a few examples of the editions that I am planning on keeping the color story of. From left to right, we have a 2015 Knickerbocker Classics published by Race Point Publishing, a 1980 Beekman Classic Edition published by Beekman, and a 2011 Barnes & Noble Collectible Edition published by Barnes & Noble. The designs of these editions are simple and minimalistic. However, I feel that there could have been more done to make the cover stand out on the shelf. However, I also feel that the blue and gold has become the commercialized aesthetic of Pride and Prejudice. And these are the most popular versions that have portraits on the cover. The middle you will have probably seen in high school. I don't necessarily think that these designs are bad. However, to a new reader, a dull portrait is not as inviting as a fun, modern cover could be. From left to right, we have a 1983 Bantam Classic published by Bantam, a 2003 Penguin Books paperback edition, and a 2004 Oxford University Press Oxford World Classic edition. Since Pride and Prejudice is a well-loved book, I thought that taking inspiration from Mr. Boddington's Penguin Classic covers would be a good start. I took inspiration from the lively patterns, color stories, and typography. I first fell in love with these editions by buying Alice in Wonderland a few years ago, and subsequently I added the rest of the collection a few years later. The typeface, although slightly different on each cover, is a relatively uniform sans serif handwritten font. The titles are all formatted in the same oval on each cover, which adds to the uniformity while also allowing each novel to stand on their own within the cover or on your shelf. The next editions that I took inspiration from were the Puffin and Rifle Paper Co. in Bloom book collection. I loved the fairy tale-like color story, the individual typography, and the overall busyness of the covers. With the illustration and the title almost fighting for your attention, it was important for the designers to make sure that the base color of all of the books was saturated enough so that the lines and shapes did not get fucked. The next editions that I took inspiration from were the Puffin and Rifle Paper Co. in Bloom book collection. I love the fairy tale-like color story, the individual typography on each book, and the overall busyness of the covers. With the illustration in the title almost fighting for your attention, it was important for the designers to saturate the background color enough to keep all the lines and shapes visible. This is well accomplished within this collection. However, for my own design, I chose to go with a more minimalistic and soft color story approach. The final collection of editions that I took inspiration from was the Penguin Classics republished editions. I liked the simplicity of the repeated pattern, the muted and simple color palettes, and the symbology and significant imagery on the front of each of the novels that explained what was significant within the novel. In my own edition, I tried to emulate the significant imagery shown on the covers of these editions. I did take inspiration from these editions. However, to set my design apart, I found an image of a hand-drawn corset and I overlaid watercolor splashes onto the illustration. I feel that the contrast between the solid lines of the corset and the organic and fluid lines of the watercolor splashes play nicely off of each other. I also use a handwritten typeface that reminds me of the handwritten letters within the book. By staying within the gold and blue color story set forth by other cover editions, it is not a large departure from the novel's commercialized aesthetic. This also means that the spine of the book and the cover of the book would not clash or compete with other editions that a buyer may already have on his or her shelf. I think that the new modern edition of Pride and Prejudice would be a good gateway into bringing new audience of readers into classic literature and bringing some life back to a classic that is already well loved. Thank you.